Hello and welcome to the interview series From Suicide Loss to Purpose, where you find out how to rewire your brain and discover your purpose so you can finally find your inner peace. I created this series to give you all a go-to place with plenty of helpful resources, advice, and encouragement from those who are experts in their field, so you can find meaning in your life after losing your loved one to suicide. Let's make a deal. Commit to taking one action after you watch this interview, because time alone doesn't heal wounds. It's so important what you do with your time. I'm your host, Carol Brookings, and with me today is Sara Cobb. Sara is the founder of My Grief Connection, which empowers grievers to find resources, connect to community, and grow hope by guiding them towards their personal healing path. Sara felt called to connect fellow grievers with resources to find hope and healing after loss, following the tragic deaths of her two older brothers, 43 years apart, one by a freak accident and one in a murder-suicide. In the fall of 2021, Sara returned to university to pursue a Master's of Science in Counseling Education with a focus on clinical mental health counseling and grief, crisis, and trauma. Sara is also the co-founder of a virtual support group for survivors of murder-suicide loss. Welcome, Sara. It's great to have you back with us today. Tell us a bit more about your story and how you got here.
Hi, Carol. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be here today, and I appreciate that kind introduction. I'm honored to be included in another one of your series. I feel like a veteran of the series that you do. You know, you've kindly invited me to so many, so thank you so much. Yeah. As you mentioned in the intro, I've lost my two older brothers, Stephen and Skylar. My oldest brother, Stevie, died in an accidental electrocution when my parents were living in South Korea, working as Christian missionaries in the 1970s. And he was just a couple months shy of turning 7 at the time. And of course, it was a shattering loss for them. And for Skylar, who was just 4 years old at the time, he witnessed that accident and was really traumatized and devastated by the death of his big brother, who he adored. 11 months later, I was born into the family. So my family really was going through acute grieving, while they were expecting my birth. And even though I never met him, I knew that I had a big brother in heaven, and my folks shared stories and photos with my younger brother, Adam, and I. And, we got to know Stevie a little bit by that, and our family just did their best to keep his memory alive. Yeah, so if we skip forward in time, 43 years, I believe the unprocessed grief and trauma from Stevie's death, as well as other difficult life experiences and mental health challenges in later years, were some contributing factors in what led to Skylar's death and a murder-suicide, which forced me to grieve in ways I never had before. So it's a long and complicated story, a little too much detail, right, to get into here, but a brief synopsis is that his closest relationship kind of fell apart quickly in front of his eyes, and he had a terrible day where he spiraled into a bipolar hypomanic episode, which was made worse by drinking too much alcohol that day. And all of that, and likely other factors that I don't completely understand and never will probably, right, led to his darkest moment and the worst choice he made as a human. He impulsively killed his fiancée, Crystal, in their home late on the night of the 4th of July in 2018, before taking his own life. So the following afternoon, Crystal's best friend found them after she failed to show up at work that day, right? The friend came to check and see what was going on, make sure they were okay. Just thought maybe they had too much to drink on the 4th, right? But found them. And eventually, after the police got involved in then investigating the deaths, they notified our families of the gruesome truth, and my world turned upside down. And I was not prepared to lose them, especially not in such a horrific way. My younger brother Adam and I were very close and connected siblings with Skylar. We all got along really well, just really we're close and tight, and so it was extremely difficult for us to lose him, and impossible, really truly, to understand how he could have done something so out of character and shocking. It just didn't compute in our brains, right, that this was actually happening, and real. And I know it was unbelievably hard and devastating for our parents, especially, to lose a second child. Extremely difficult for his kids, his former wife, and worst of all, for Chrissy's family. And it was just an awful situation for everyone who knew them and loved them. And I struggled for several months to just function on the basic levels, right? To get up and go to work and do all the things, right? I had a hard time just making sense of what happened in a way that would allow me to feel like I could move forward, or that I would ever be okay again. And thankfully, I feel like I was guided toward a counselor who was an excellent fit for me through some divine intervention. Like, that's a whole story in and of itself. I won't get into, but there's lots of those kind of stories interwoven throughout my whole story, of little moments like God winks and synchronicities and I don't know, whatever you think, whatever you believe it, right? Like, all these crazy things that work together to help me through this process. But I worked with this counselor pretty intensively for about 6 to 8 months, really on these kind of core emotions around the grief and the losses caused by both the suicide and the murder, before I started to see some real significant kind of shifts in my feelings and in my grief. And about 9 months after the deaths, I found a local suicide support loss group and attended regularly for a couple of years. Now, being in school, it doesn't really work with my schedule, but it's a great group, and it was really very helpful to be able to share my story with others who kind of could get it on some level, right? That normal people, right, don't really quite understand. In addition to counseling and group work, I did a lot of reading and journaling and self-care. Just tried to move my body a lot, right? Get outside, create art, receive body work, pray, meditate, just pursuing all kinds of different types of healing modalities. And those things just really, really helped me a lot. I also started researching resources. I have some skills in that area because I worked in library reference for a long time, and I have a hobby of genealogy research. So I just tried to find all the grief support resources that I thought might be helpful for me, right? I started compiling them for my own use, millions of bookmarks, right, on my computer. But unfortunately, there were almost no support materials available for murder-suicide loss, and or even ways to connect with other survivors that I could find. So one day I was in counseling, and I just was kind of complaining about how hard it was to find grief support to my counselor. And of course, she empathized with me and, was understanding and stuff. But then, as counselors do, right, she kind of challenged me a little bit. And she said something about, maybe there is a way I could find a solution, right? Or maybe I could fill that need somehow. And at first I was kind of annoyed by that suggestion, right? Because I'm like, I'm the one who needs the support, right? Why do I need to do the work too, right? But after considering it for a week or two, it kind of sunk in, and I realized, she's right. If I want to have the solution I need, then I'm going to have to find a way to create that somehow. So it was sort of a, be the change you want to see in the world kind of realization. Mm-hmm. And I found inspiration by my counselor's encouragement and my desire to honor Stevie and Skylar and Crystal, and the possibility that pain could be helpful somehow and not just hurtful. So I had the idea just to create a very simple webpage with a few grief resource links that might connect others to support. Mm-hmm. And to me, that felt like it could be meaningful, right? To some way to take this awful thing and make something good, come after it. So I spent about 6 hours in a cafe on the first anniversary of Sky and Crystal's death. And I just tried to figure out a way to make the first iteration of my grief connection. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not a web designer, right? I just sort of pasted things together, figured it out, and launched that. And then shortly after, I ended up starting a Facebook account and Instagram, and just started sharing resources there and quotes and just sharing my story. And that fall, I told my story publicly for the first time at a local walk to raise funds for suicide prevention. And I've been doing that every year since. So this is going to be the 5th year coming up, and that's really something that's giving me a lot of meaning and comfort, to be a part of. And since then, I've slowly just started, healing those different layers of my grief, right? Comes up in different ways over time. And I've made a lot of progress. I feel really good now. But it's a process, and I've worked real hard to build the resource list on mygriefconnection.org. A couple years ago, I founded co-founded a virtual support group for murder, suicide, loss survivors. And I co-facilitate that group as well. It's grown incredibly fast and had significant impact, I think, on that population of grievers who haven't had any support, the support they needed or deserved before. Mm-hmm. So eventually, also with the encouragement from my counselor and from others, I decided to continue to try to find ways to impact grievers for good. So I chose to make a major career shift, and I quit my stable job at a library so I could go to graduate school and incur a lot of debt to pursue a master's of counseling, focusing on clinical mental health and grief, trauma, and crisis. That just seemed like, I have this experience, might as well put some education behind it, right? So that I could use that to help others. So I work part-time as well as a webinar facilitator for a domestic violence treatment program. So teaching anger management and cognitive behavioral therapy-based psychoeducation and emotional regulation skills to court-mandated violent offenders, which I never expected to be doing, right? But it's kind of amazing because it's sort of a way that I could help maybe prevent this type of loss from happening in other families, right? If I can help those people that are really struggling in their relationships, have the potential to become perpetrators of some type of violence like this, then I think, for me, that was extremely meaningful and gave some purpose to what happened, that I could be part of that, just because I understand the dynamics, right, on a lot of levels, and I understand in some ways why perpetrators sometimes do what they do, and they can also still be amazing, wonderful people and do something horribly wrong and out of character. So anyway, really my life has taken a 180-degree turn over the last 5 years. So much unexpected, rich meaning and purpose have grown out of this terrible, really crappy experience that I wish had never happened. At the same time, I'm really grateful for all the good that's come from it. Mm-hmm. And I just do my best to try to continue to share my story at local events and podcasts and summits and webinars, and just try to help grievers find connection and community and hope that will lead them down their unique path toward healing, and maybe find a space for the possibility that there can be meaning and purpose in life after loss.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I appreciate you being here and sharing that with our viewers. And like I always say, when I've got you on, when we think about the complex grief around a suicide loss that, like you said, normal people don't understand, and then we imagine a murder suicide loss, is always another layer of complexity on top of that. So I really appreciate you being so open with us and sharing your story. And as you were telling it, I was smiling a lot because of course I know your whole background story, some of the stuff you haven't shared. And I just love, like you said, the divine intervention that's been happening to you from when your counselor said, oh, maybe you could do something about it. And you're like, why me? And then it's like, well, actually, and then seeing how far you've come, and you're really, you say my grief connection, and that's who you are. When if I need to find something out with grief, or do you know so and so or someone, right? You're there. You're the person who connects people with resources. So yeah, I love what you do, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Carol.
Yeah. Well, let's talk to our viewers now who are longing to find a purpose after losing a loved one to suicide. And in your introduction, you mentioned around, that something good came from the murder suicide. And I know some people, especially towards the beginning of their journey, they think, okay, how can possibly something good come from that? So what can you say to them?
Yeah, no, I was one of you for sure, right? That just made me feel gross when people said that in the very beginning, right? Like, nothing good can come from this, right? This is just pure awful. So yeah, good question there. I think I want to start by saying that turning pain into purpose is not a moral imperative, right? We aren't obligated to do so. But our society really puts a lot of pressure on people to push past pain immediately, to find the bright side, to positive everything, that toxic positivity kind of thing, and believe that everything happens for a reason. And I don't totally buy that, right? I think it's not always very healthy or empathetic to approach it that way. And I don't think it's very helpful for us to say those kind of things to grievers, right? Purpose is something that each person has to find for themselves. And so, yeah, we can't tell someone, it doesn't help to tell someone else like, oh, there's a reason for this, everything happens for a reason. Like, okay, yeah, it doesn't feel right to the person hearing that information. And they might come to that conclusion at some point, but they need to be the one to do that. So, I think many things do happen for a reason, but also sometimes terrible things happen and there isn't a good reason for it. And nothing we can do or no amount of positivity can make it okay or acceptable. I think pain is pain and purpose is purpose, but they absolutely can coexist and sometimes they overlap. I think the pain created by terrible things happening can act as fuel that leads us toward discovering meaning and purpose and goodness in life, in our life and in the lives of those that we've lost and in the wider world. Okay? So feeling lost and untethered and overwhelmed by significant grief is normal, but it can be really unsettling and disorienting. And people who people ask themselves questions about purpose often begin with ambiguity, right? There's a hesitancy and uncertainty, and those things actually kind of inspire the desire to discover more profound meaning and direction. So we need to have that, right, to be able to get to a place where we can even think that meaning is possible. And even though, as a survivor, you might be angry that of this loss of control, right? I really encourage you or people out there listening, right, to be gentle with yourself. In my view, living in a space of meaningful purpose is a process and it's not a destination. So there isn't an endpoint that you reach, like some ultimate purpose, like, oh, I've reached purpose, and then you're done, right? No, it doesn't work that way. I conceptualize it as something that evolves and changes over time. And it's really essential to permit yourself to take as long as it takes to go through that process of grieving and to heal enough to be open to there being any purpose worth pursuing. So don't pressure yourself into treating it like it's a treasure hunt or a race to a finish line, or, compare yourself to others and what they're doing and experiencing because they got their own thing going on, right? You just do you. Focus on taking good care of yourself, treat yourself with compassion, and give yourself the grace to go at your own pace. Try to surround yourself with people who are loving and supportive and don't judge you and that will listen and not try to solve the problem of grief or provide ideas of what your purpose should be. They can't possibly know anyway because purpose is personal. Right? When we feel ready to explore options, or when you feel ready to explore options, you'll know it. And you can start taking small steps in the direction that means the most to you or is the easiest or makes the most sense for you. And once you get going, like you start taking those little steps, the direction may even start to change a little bit, right? You might make multiple changes over time, right? And that's okay. You can be purpose curious, I like to call it, right? You can try things out and just find out what works right for you. So finding purpose is largely, in my view, at least at this point, right? It may change, but it's about applying your skills and strengths and passions to contribute to the good in the world in ways that matter most to you and provide you with a sense of significance and contribution, belonging, and connection to community. So ask yourself questions like, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? What issues are significant to me? How much time and energy do I have to expend? What talents and abilities and skills can I use to support a cause or make a difference in the lives of others? If you reflect on these kind of questions, I think you can brainstorm ideas about repurposing your skills to pursue interests that you've cultivated and wisdom that you've gained through your life experiences to help the world and to find personal significance. So also just understanding your values can narrow your purpose down to something that's relatable and manageable and makes sense for you. So just spend a little time trying to identify and understand what you care about. I think that's an essential step in getting into that right direction, right? Start listing everything you value. Maybe really like literally get out a piece of paper and write down all your values, right? Spend some time doing that. And then kind of look at that list and narrow it down to maybe 3 to 5 of your most deeply held values. And then just kind of sit with that for a little bit and see if you start feeling pulled toward any particular direction or any little next steps.
Mhm. Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And what came to mind when, you know, we talk about the good that can come from it. I mean, a little bit about my stories. As you know, I lost my mum to suicide 9.5 years ago, and you know, I never thought that any good could come from it. How possibly, right? My mum took her life. I mean, what good can come from it? And it took some time for me to get to where I am today. I'm not going to share all of that. But I'm at a place now where it's become my calling to support other suicide loss survivors, because I know what helps, and I know there's not enough support out there. On the flip side, when I think about my mom's suicide, I always think it's incredibly sad that she took her life. And
Yes.
you know, I mentioned in one of my recent emails that if I had the choice, I would have her back in a heartbeat and not do any of this.
Absolutely.
Right. But the thing
Same.
is, we can't change reality. We can't change what happened as much as we'd like to. So then it's like, okay, what can we do? And to me, having this calling, having this purpose, as well as supporting others, and you know, it lights me up when I see the journey that my clients go on and their progress. But for me, on a personal level, I also find that it means that my mom's suicide was just like that little bit less of a waste, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
all for nothing. Like I think something good came from it.
Yeah, same. I feel the same way. Absolutely. Just totally resonate with everything you said there, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's yeah, I really wanted to not feel like everything was in vain, right? That their deaths and the way they died was not, you know, just a total waste, right? Like that there needed to be something. I don't know that I want to use the word positive, right? But it feels wrong. But like something, you know, that came from that or after that or somehow sprouted from that or, you know, was fertilized by all the crap, right, of that situation that that can be useful or good or contribute somehow to the world, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you've now given our viewers some first steps on what they can do if they, you know, they can't even start thinking about their purpose. So once they've worked through some of that, and like I said, discovered their values, what's important to them, what they want to do, how can they then discover their purpose and make it a reality?
Wow. Yeah, that's tough question, right? It's just hard to wrap your mind around because I think a lot of people just struggle so much, right, with just even perceiving at all, right, that something good might come from it. So you got to get past that part, right? And that's difficult. It's hard to wrap our mind around the thought that anything good can come from like an earth-shattering loss like this. And I certainly felt that way for sure. It didn't the possibility of that even being there just didn't make sense to me for a long time because I had to process through a lot of thoughts and emotions first. And I had to talk to a lot of non-judgmental people about it that I could trust, right? Well, not a lot, but I had to talk to people about it, and I had to find a few non-judgmental people that I could really go deep with, you know? So I think that's really important, right? Just finding your people that you can talk to. I had to connect with others who had been through something similar, and not just survived, but thrived. And that was huge, because it gave me that bit of hope I needed, that it was possible for me too. I had to allow myself to just be open to the idea that, right, things could get better, and that things could good things could exist after bad things happen. So it's a mental game, right? It's a mental thing. We have to kind of get in the right mindset, and that's really important. I'm not sure if I answered your question there. So can you repeat that for me just one more time? Because I feel like maybe I went off track a little bit. But
yeah, no, I just want to comment on that, and then you can
okay.
expand a little bit further. Because you said it's a mind game, right? And from a brain point of view, the mindset is so important. And I applied that to different scenarios in a couple of other interviews. But if we just sit there and think, okay, nothing good can ever come from this, never feel better, there'll never be any purpose, there'll never be any meaning, all that kind of stuff, our brain just basically shuts off and says, okay, I'm done. You know, you say it's not going to get better, I believe you, because our brain always wants to prove us right. You're never in a situation where the brain's like trying to prove us wrong. So
confirmation bias, right? It's always looking to prove our own biases.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you for sharing that from like a counseling point of view. It sounds like something you learned. Yeah. No, that's an interesting way of putting it. Exactly. We always want to prove ourselves right. We've got that confirmation bias. So if we tell ourselves something, we'll find proof to make sure we're right. But if we told us the opposite thing, again, we would want to find proof that it's right. And that's why I always say, even if it is difficult right now and you don't know how it might be possible that you'll ever find purpose, instead of saying, okay, no, there's no way, just saying, okay, I don't know how, I don't know when, and I'm leaving myself open to the possibility, maybe it's possible. And that just gives your mind something to focus on. So it's a very small change on the scale, but from a mindset perspective makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're totally right. There's a concept in narrative therapy called unique outcomes or sparkling moments. And that's, you know, we tell ourselves these stories, right? We believe these stories about our lives and about things that happen to us. We reinforce them, right? We have this confirmation bias, and we believe what's called the dominant discourse, which is like the stories out in the greater world and society, things that, you know, have kind of been put upon us, right? So we get these kind of embedded stories. And then one of the things that we can do is to look for unique outcomes in our stories, like times when our problem was not such a problem, right? Or when there was something a little bit different about it, right? Or you know, hearing other people's stories, right? And knowing that, like, oh yeah, okay, that person, they went through the same thing, and look at them now, they're okay, or they've done this or that, or you know, no, just attaching on to those kind of good moments, those sparkling moments, right? Those things that are positive, recognizing that you know, other people have been able to get through things that are hard like this too. I think that can really help if we kind of can focus on that. That gives us something shiny, a shiny object, right, for our mind to focus on, instead of the stuff that we're kind of used to just running on a hamster wheel, right, in our brains. I mean, you know, you said like we ask ourselves these kind of questions that are not very helpful sometimes, right? We get on a loop. You know, when we've lost someone important to us, right? We ask, like, you know, why did this happen? What's the point? Who am I now after my life has changed, right? Who am I without my person in the world? You know, how can I think about discovering purpose when life feels meaningless, right? Or how do I go on without my person? with me. But I think more helpful questions to ask to help us kind of look for those maybe little moments of sparkle, right? Or positivity or hope is, like, what qualities do I possess that have enabled me to overcome challenges in my life, right? What has helped, or how have I been able to help others in the past, right? What are the qualities in me that have allowed me to be of help to others? How have others been able to help me in my previous struggles, right? What are the things other people have done for me that have been helpful when I've had a hard time? What are qualities that my loved one admired in me, right? And what of my loved ones' traits, which of my loved ones' traits do I want to embody and honor going forward in my life? So I think those kind of questions are could be helpful. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking as you were saying that, for our viewers, it might be helpful to rewatch this interview and write down some of those questions, so they don't just think about it in their minds and think, oh yeah, there's this and that, but really writing it down with pen and paper is always so helpful. And we can see what's there. We can pull up stuff from our subconscious. We can add to it, and it's just so much easier to work through. And I think that way also things and patterns become apparent, and then you see, oh yeah, I never thought about this or that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think writing this stuff down is super helpful, right? Just grappling with these kind of questions requires a lot of introspection. And I think one thing it does too is help us be able to separate a little bit from the event. So that's also a thing I'm learning about in narrative therapy, right? We want to separate ourselves, right? Realize the problem is the problem. We're not the problem, right? And not let it overcome us and become our identity, right? We don't want this loss to become our identity, right? We want to be able to have a little space between us and it. Externalize, that's what it's called. Externalize the problem. We want to see a little bit outside of ourselves. So I think just taking time to reflect and tune out the outside world's demands and noise and expectations and all that stuff, can be really helpful. You might want to take some time to just connect with God or your higher power by prayer or meditation or writing, like journaling or brain dumping, or just getting those things out, answering those questions, maybe even on paper. Just even creating art. If you're not a words person, or if it's hard right now to come up with the right words, just coloring or scribbling or collaging or doing something artistic, right? That can help us kind of get the process started, right? Or if you're a nature person, right, go on long walks and just be outside, right? Or go dance or take a class or something that helps you kind of move your body, if that's helpful for you. Whatever it takes to help you kind of make some space in your body, your mind, your heart is important, right? And because we need to build some self-awareness, and I think that's one way to do it, right? Some awareness about what we really feel and what we need, and the direction that we feel guided toward, right? If we don't have that self-awareness, then we can have like a false feeling of purpose based on what other people's expectations are, and I think that's pretty counterproductive and not very helpful, right? It's distracting us from the real path that we need to be on. So I think when you're aware of the possibilities, right, and you just take that smallest action step, the next thing that you can do, it could be something super simple, doing a little self-care for yourself, right? Sending a text to a friend who's supportive of you, reading a chapter in a book, watching a talk on a grief summit, going for a walk around the block, or it could be a bigger thing, right? Like making your first therapy appointment, attending a support group meeting, something like that, or signing up for coaching, right? Those things are what are going to kind of move us in the right direction. And even if we don't know the purpose yet, they'll help us get on that path, right? Toward that, in the right direction. So it's up to everyone to decide for themselves, right? How they want to manage. But you can't really start living in purpose if you don't take action. Just do the next right thing, right? Like frozen, right? You know, like hold on to that mantra, like do the next right thing, like sing that in your head if you have to.
Mhm.
But I think that's so important, because what we do is what makes the difference between where we are and where we want to be, right? Want to go.
Yeah, yeah, definitely some great suggestions there. And like I said, it can be helpful to get some outside support, whether that's counseling or coaching.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I always believe that all of us, we've got the answers within us. It just sometimes takes another person to ask you the right questions, like the counselor did for you, right? To get you thinking in a certain directions. And I find sometimes people they're just stuck. They
Yeah.
don't think something's possible. Or, you know, you talked about our stories earlier, and we've all got our own stories, and it can be really difficult to recognize them as stories that we're telling us, right? The untrue, unhelpful thoughts, they're all made up into stories because we believe them. We believe
Yeah.
them to be the absolute truth.
True.
So
Right.
that's what I find helpful as well for my clients, where someone else can see them for what they are, and again, gently guide you. And
Yeah.
you know, I work with a coach because I know I've got my own stories around things, and
Yeah.
I think it's just so helpful to be able to work with someone.
Yeah, I think if we try to like do this in a vacuum, that's where we can get into real trouble, right? Because it's so easy in isolation to kind of miss things, right? And not see the bigger picture, and not be open um, to other ways of interpreting our stories, right? We kind of get locked in to our perceptions of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really a key thing, right? Connecting with others, you know, talking about our story, externalizing the problem, right? Getting it out, right? And then noticing, you know, those sparkling moments, right? Those exceptions with things, and that's where we find, you know, that hope, and then we can kind of continue forward,
Yeah.
and get headed at least in the right direction. That's going to make us feel better, right? And be able to take some action, and then, you know, that builds and gets better and better.
Yeah, exactly. And earlier we mentioned the support group for murder, suicide, loss survivors that you're co-leading. Can you tell us a bit more about that, what that looks like, and if there's someone who's lost a loved one in a murder, suicide, how they can reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I co-founded and co-facilitate an online support group for murder, suicide, loss survivors. We host members from all across the country, right? Right now we have people from Hawaii, Alaska, just through California, Florida, New York, like all over the place. It's crazy. So it's hard to find a right time that works for everybody's schedule and time zone, but we're trying to work on that to have some more options. But the group started about 2.5 years ago with just a handful of members. It was not something that we planned to be like this big deal, right? It was just like, oh, there's a few of us that found each other, let's get together and talk. And then it kind of kept going, and we sort of added more people, and people kept finding us, and we're like, okay, I guess we're doing a full support group here, right? Which is, it's great. It's sort of organically, again, it's one of those kind of things that sort of like developed. We just took kind of the first step, and we're like, well, let's have a meeting, right? And it kind of grew. We're just volunteer led, peer led group. Typically we meet about 90 minutes at a time. We usually meet 1 or 2 evenings a month via Zoom. We actually have been in pause for the last few months because the other co-founder and I and some of the members who've agreed to volunteer to kind of help be like on a decision committee. Like, we're working to try to figure out how we can grow the group more sustainably so that we can continue to meet without it just being on, you know, 2 of us volunteers doing everything, right? So we're working on that. We're trying to get meetings resumed, and hopefully those will start up again in June. That's our goal. So we'll hopefully begin again then. And when we meet, we you know, our goal is just to kind of provide some hope and community for those experiencing this kind of rare loss, which unfortunately is becoming more and more common. We keep having new members reach out. We keep having people find us because people are desperate for support for this kind of loss. We just try to offer a space that's supportive to let people explore avenues of healing. We welcome survivors of murder-suicide loss, whether they're regardless of the relationship they had to those that died, right? So we have people in the group that were more connected with the perpetrator, some more with the victims, and some were connected with both somehow, right? We have a few people in the group that are survivors of attempts. So their person attempted to take their life, took their own life, but the victim survived, right? So we have a kind of a mix. So just be aware for those that are interested in support, right? That there's a variety of people in the group. Anyway, we just want to have the space that's available. And our goal really is to leave participants with some skills and tools and some feelings of connection and hope, and a little bit of new perspective that helps them feel a little less alone, right? And be able to maybe make some baby steps toward their healing goals. So people can just actually at this point just email me if you want more information about joining. We usually do an intake call just to kind of hear your story and get to know you and see if it's a right fit before we let anyone join the group, obviously for safety, privacy as well, right? We need to screen a little bit just to make sure that everything's safe for the people in the group. But people can email me. My email is mygriefconnection@outlook.com. And I'll be happy to talk with them more about that.
Yeah, brilliant. Sounds amazing. Again, thank you for providing us such a much needed resource. Yeah. And I think when we talked before, you are the only online support group for suicide loss survivors in the US, right?
Yeah, for murder-suicide, we've been the only group that we're aware of up until just actually in April. There is a group that started, the Georgia Commission for Family Violence actually began like a 6-week, I think it was like a 6-week group for survivors of murder-suicide that are located in Florida or Georgia because of their laws. Like it was facilitated by a couple licensed counselors, right? So there's licensing laws and things like that, right? Who can be in the group. But so as far as we know, that was the only other group for that kind of loss, and that was just like a short-term group. We're hoping that they will continue to offer these groups, right? So that there is some more options out there, especially because we were on a break for a little while. We're glad that we actually have several members that live in Florida and Georgia, so hopefully they were able to attend that group. And we hope other groups like this will form, right? We don't want to be the only ones out here. There needs to be more. We're constantly being contacted by survivors, like a few every month, right, that reach out to us. And we get people from all places in the process, I guess, or all timelines, right? We've had people reach out to us within like the first 2 weeks after their loss, and then we've had people that reached out to us 30 years after they lost someone, and had never had support in that time, right? Never met another survivor. So wide range of experience in the group, but I think that's what makes it beautiful, right? Is that we have all these different perspectives, and we have people that are more seasoned, that have been through some stuff, right? That have made some healing changes in their lives, that can be there to offer that hope, right? And to be that sparkling moment, right? Or that little example, right? That there's possibility of healing. And then we have people that are just real fresh in it too, right? That really need that support. So we kind of, it works well, I think.
Yeah. Well, amazing. Wrapping up then, if you were to leave our viewers with one single action today, what would it be?
Yeah. That's always tough, right? To narrow that down. But I mean, I think just take some quiet time today if you can, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, right? Just think of this as a little baby step, right? Just take 5 or 10 minutes to yourself, quiet. Just allow yourself some of that space to consider what life could be like if you were able to if you were available for the idea that you deserve to have a life infused with some meaning and purpose in it, even though you've experienced this horrible loss, right? Because you are worthy of that, right? You deserve that, but you need to. I mean, I can tell you that all day long, but you have to feel that and experience it to get it. So just allow yourself a little bit of that space, right? So maybe just take that little break today to think about it and to and to just have some quiet around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've got a free gift to give away today, which we'll link to below this video. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Yeah. Yeah, I just created a free PDF that attendees can download. It's called Grief Resources for Murder, Suicide, Loss Survivors. It actually has a lot of resources on there that are helpful for suicide loss survivors too, because there's not a lot of specific ones for murder suicide. I've included any of those I can find, but a lot are more general for just suicide loss or homicide loss too, right? Because there's those two parts to it. So even if you haven't lost someone in a murder suicide, I still would download the resource list because there's a lot of helpful things on there. It's got clickable links to the resources like suicide prevention and postvention organizations, articles, webinars, videos, blog posts, podcasts, books, all that kind of stuff, right? I just try to kind of bring together, consolidate all the most helpful resources that I could find that I wish I had at my fingertips when I first had my loss. Someone had handed me that, right? That first week or whatever, I would have been like, oh my gosh, thank you, right? Probably my grief connection probably wouldn't have existed if that happened. So maybe it's a good thing it didn't, but hopefully this list gives some survivors a solid starting point to help find support and connection. And it could also benefit friends or family who know of someone who's experienced these types of loss, right? So they can understand how to better support survivors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing you, I know it'll be really detailed and great resources.
I think it's like 12 pages, sorry.
Oh, that's good, because different things will resonate with different people as well. So I love that you've got everything from, podcasts and books to blogs, and so people can just pick and choose.
Right. And don't let it overwhelm you. It's a lot, right? But just kind of go through it on your own time, right? Just look at one article a day or something like that, just to take it at your own pace. I just wanted to offer up the menu of options.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like I said, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for providing that, and thank you for talking with us today. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's helpful to remember that this is a process, and it's not about finding some great purpose, some ultimate thing, right? There's no end point to it, right? It's finding meaning and purpose is a process. And the meaning and purpose isn't in the loss or the death itself, right? That doesn't really hold water, right? It's about discovering purpose in life, in your life, in their life, in life in general, right? So maybe just try to switch your thinking a little bit on that if you can. I know it's a kind of a hard concept, right? But do your best to kind of be open to that. And I'm just really, grateful to have had this opportunity to share some of my thoughts around my own losses and how I've been able to experience meaning after something so dreadful. And it may not resonate totally with everybody, right? Not everything I said is going to hit with everyone. And that's okay, right? We all kind of have different points of view and are at different points in our process. So, but I hope, everyone who watches can take away at least one or two little nuggets of information or encouragement that will help empower them to seek those moments of meaning and purpose through their own walk on their path of grief. And I have one quote I'd like to share, if that's okay, that I found when I was researching and stuff. It's by an author named Ken Grimwood. And it says, all life includes loss. It's taken me many, many years to learn to deal with that. And I don't expect I'll ever be fully resigned to it. But that doesn't mean we have to turn away from the world. Stop striving for the best that we can do and be. We owe that much to ourselves, at least, and we deserve whatever measure of good may come from it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. For me, I felt, ooh, that hits.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you again for being here. It's been great to have you. And to our viewers, be sure to tune into our next interviews for more valuable advice and encouragement on your suicide bereavement journey. Until then, take care and see you in the next interview. Bye-bye.